What's going on, everybody? Now, if you haven't heard, the second closed beta of Arknights Endfield has just begun a few days ago, and I'm super excited to say I've been invited to experience it first hand. Yeah, I know I'm a little late to the party because I ended up spending way more time than expected polishing the script, as I wanted this video to be packed with useful info, not just a rushed first impression. Anyway, I can promise this entire video is clear and informative. That said, I haven't played their previous title before, so I can't really say how this game connects to it. Nevertheless, I'll still do my best to share my honest impressions of it based solely on my own experience as a complete newcomer to the franchise. And of course, keep in mind this is still in the beta, so anything we're going to see in this video might change with the full release. So with that out of the way, let's jump right in and see what's all about. Alright, let's start with the overall impression, which by the time I'm recording this, I've spent at least 15 hours in the beta and made it to level 22. Obviously not the highest out there, as I've already seen people reaching level 52 already, which is just ridiculous. But hey, I had to force myself to slow down, so I could put this video together for you guys. Can't just keep all the fun to myself, right? Well, in any case, I've gotta say, I fell in love with this game before I even finished the prologue, because you can immediately feel the quality right from the beginning. Despite being a gacha game, the graphics are actually surprisingly impressive, and the character models look exceptionally polished and detailed, which I would say is a lot better than its peers in my opinion. On top of that, the combat feels incredibly smooth, easy to learn, and most importantly, fun and satisfying to play. Honestly, it's so well polished that if you told me this was the full release, I would totally believe you. And now here's the big surprise, because the combat isn't even the main focus in this game, as it only maps out around 30-40% of the gameplay, based on my experience so far. Once you get further into the story, the game introduces another big part of the gameplay, the base management and factory simulation. Pretty strange for a gacha game, right? It's probably not as hardcore as those standalone factory simulation games, but it's interesting enough that I found myself spending more time with it than doing the quests, exploring the world, or even fighting. As the matter of fact, not only most main quests in the game are tied to it, but the gear for your characters is all manufactured exclusively by your own factories, with the materials you possess, so you can't really avoid it even if you want to. Alright, that's the basic overview of this game, so let's dive into each aspect in detail to see how everything works. First off, it's obviously going to be the combat system, where in this game, you are basically running a squad with 4 team members, directly controlling one of them while the others fight alongside you. Honestly, it reminds me of Final Fantasy 15, because that's pretty much exactly how it works. Anyway, each teammate has their own health bar, and you can switch to any of them whenever you want in a fight, so it's all fluid and flexible. But so far I haven't noticed any real advantage of it, as all their skills are always available to use, regardless who you control. Now speaking of the skills, each character comes with 2 active skills. First is a basic skill that uses the energy bar in the middle, which automatically regenerates on its own, and is shared between all team members. The best part is that there's no cooldown to it whatsoever, so you can actually use the same skill back to back as long as you have the energy. In fact, you are even encouraged to do this, not just because you usually pour all your resources into leveling up one character, but because some skills can apply status effects onto the enemies, which requires multiple users to apply it. Now the second skill is an ultimate ability that uses individual energy, shown by the circle above the skill, which is pretty classic. And like I said earlier, you can use all these skills without switching characters, which is really convenient. And you know what? We're actually not done just yet, as I still haven't covered the most exciting part of the combat, the combo skills, which pops up as a quick time event. It's a unique skill that triggers under different conditions depending on the character. Like for example, Jen's combo triggers after using any basic skill, whereas the main character's combo triggers after triggering other character's combo skill. Some other triggers after doing the last hit of the normal attack combo. Different characters have different conditions. Now put this together with the previous 2 skills, and you basically have endless abilities to use throughout the whole fight, which makes it really dynamic and satisfying to play. Finally, when it comes to the combat for the characters you actually entirely control, it's actually extremely simple with only 2 actions to do: attack and dodge. That's all. though I really appreciate the perfect dodge mechanic, not just because it's satisfying to do, but it's also pretty rewarding, as every successful dodge restores half of his stamina and recovers some energy. So yeah, that's basically everything about the combat. But just before moving on to the next session, one last thing I want to mention is that, surprisingly, the AI control characters are actually pretty solid. Obviously they are not as aggressive as we do, but they are surprisingly good in avoiding enemy attacks, even those with big AoE. Honestly, I die more often than my AI teammates, and that's just embarrassing. By the way, that also means if you're low on HP, you can just switch to other characters to continue the risky plays, while the AI keeps them alive. That's pretty much what I did for the first 2 days, until I finally got a healer on the team for the 3rd day login reward. Anyway, I've probably spent a bit too much time talking about the combat, so let's check out the other parts of the game. Alright, so like I said earlier, another core of this game is actually the base building and factory management, as you'll be spending majority of the time managing it, or basically on the way of managing it, since the system constantly changes and improves as you progress through the main storyline. Just to let you know, I learned this the hard way, because I assumed the factory system was just a small mini game, so I spent hours of time arranging it to my liking before continuing the main story. So yeah, you can imagine what happened. I had to scrap everything I built, as I unlocked new structures that makes it much more efficient to place my factories. Anyway, enough about my suffering, and let's talk about the system itself. It's pretty clear they put quite a bit of effort into designing this, as not only there's a full research tree with more to come in the future, but there's also data reports that lets you track all the products in your bases. As a matter of fact, both features are placed right in the center of the main menu, which really shows how crucial the factory is in this game. So why is this such a big deal? For one, the story demands the product for it, otherwise you'll find yourself blocked at nearly every stage. But the real reason is the cash, since you make money by selling whatever you produce. And just to tell you in advance, the selling price are actually ridiculously low, so if you want to make more money, you have to optimize your factory production. Lastly, the gears for our characters is all crafted with the products of our factory, so you can't ignore it at all. And of course, the better the gear, the higher grade of materials you need to craft it, as well as more money it costs you. So yeah, in the end, we just have to accept this is a part of the core gameplay, and personally I don't really mind it at all. In fact, I actually kinda enjoy it, probably because I never played any factory games before, so it's a new thing for me. Now as for the world itself, these are actually pretty classic. Waypoints, treasure chests, plants, ores, collectibles, etc. Basically all the things you have seen in similar games. That said, there are a few notable differences worth pointing out. The most significant one is probably the essence of climbing and gliding, meaning you will be exploring the map on foot in a more traditional way. Personally, I don't think it's a big issue, since the world itself is pretty linear without any big mountains to climb. Though I'll admit, there were some moments where I really wish climbing was an option. For example, in this clip, I was just a little bit short of jumping out onto it to continue the quest, which felt pretty frustrating. And the solution to it was to connect the cable for the base all the way to the quest location, just to power out a device that lets you jump higher. So yeah, there are quite a few locations like this, so you have to get used to it. By the way, there's one feature I didn't talk about in the previous factory part, as I figure it makes more sense to bring it up here. There are few structures you can build and place anywhere in the world outside your base, including zip lines to help you get around, signposts for marking the place, and even turrets to help against tougher enemies, which is extremely cool. And you know what? The coolest part is that the other players can share their structures with you, and vice versa. As you can see, these zip lines in my game are not mine. Someone else built them in their world and chose to share them, and that's how I can use them too. And honestly, it reminds me of Dark Souls' message, but way more practical. So yeah, that pretty much covers everything about the overworld. And honestly, the shareable structures are really cool, so hopefully they'll add something else to share in the full release. Now as for the character progression, it follows the exact same gacha formula. Character, weapon, gear set, talent, and naturally potential, which is the improvements for pony duplicates. That said, although the systems are familiar, it's a bit easier to build characters in this game. To start with, All characters basically share the same upgrade materials, meaning you won't have to find separate domains, saving us time and resources. On top of that, except for daily rare resources for level break 2, it doesn't look like there's any weekly materials, and that's a massive plus for me. I've always hated the idea of grinding for an entire month just to mess out a single character. Besides, as mentioned earlier, all gear is crafted entirely in your own factory, and so far I haven't seen any RNG involved at all, at least in the early game. That means you can easily make the best gear for each character as long as your factory is set up properly. But of course, things will probably get a lot more tedious in the late game, as you see just how many different stats there are for our characters. But at the very least, you have a very easy time in the early game, which usually is the hardest. And that's basically all about characters building, in which I must say I'm pretty satisfying with how they handle this part, at least for the moment. Now speaking of characters, I must say I'm honestly quite impressed with the character models as they look really detailed and 3D, especially their outfit as every piece of fabric has dynamic motion. On top of that, they are surprisingly talkative while traveling with us, with lots of voice lines relating to what you do, as you see in the list here. Obviously it's all script, but it does make them feel more alive rather than just robots following around. Not to mention, it genuinely feels like being part of a coordinated team, especially when those combo skills come into play. So yeah, they really did a great job of making characters appealing, which makes sense since that's how they make their money, by selling us characters. Though personally sometimes I find the playable characters almost a little bit too cute, I would say, which doesn't quite fit with their world design, which is close to realistic. A bit hard to describe, but it feels as if anime characters step into the real world, combined with the fact enemies look totally like the playboys in Mad Max. Yeah, it's pretty strange. On the other hand, apparently the main character is the only human in this whole game. Seriously. In fact, it's not just the playable characters, but even the NPCs are human as well. You have got cats, dogs, puppy, wolves, cows, and dragon maybe? Some are even straight out animals. Well, I am guessing it has something to do with the Arknights, since, correct me if I'm wrong, the previous game also has a ton of animal characters, right? Finally, let's talk about the gacha system, which in my opinion is probably the worst part of this game, especially compared to how well they handle everything else. So, to start with, each pool has 0.8% chance of getting a 6-star character, which is slightly better than other similar games. That said, unfortunately this game still uses the 50-50, with soft PT beginning at 65 to 80 pulls, and the hard PT that triggers exactly 120 pulls. Sounds a bit better than other games, right? But here's the catch. First, the soft and hard PT actually works entirely separately. Hard PT resets at the start of every new banner. Third, triggering a hard PT also resets soft PT. Now you might still not fully grasp the whole picture yet, so let me explain it with an example. Let's say you have done 100 pulls in total and lost the 50-50 at 70 pulls. That means you are now at 30-80 soft PT and 100-120 half PT. And from here, two things can happen. If you spend 20 more pulls in the same banner, you are guaranteed the red out 6-star character, and both your PT resets. However, if you stop pulling now and wait for the next banner for whatever reasons, your hard PT actually resets, leaving you with only 30 pulls in soft PT. That means you have to do 120 pulls again to guarantee the red out 6-star. See how brutal this is? So basically that means if you don't have 120 pulls on hand, it's better not to spend any pulls at all, otherwise you might end up with 0 red out 6-star character if you are very unlucky and keep losing the 50-50. By the way, speaking about losing the 50-50, correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently once the banner ends, the red out 6-star is added to the standard 6-star pulls for the next 3 banners, so you actually have a chance to get them when you lose 50-50, so at least there's something. On the other hand, for the first time you do 60 pulls in same banner, you'll get 10 free pulls on the next one, which sounds pretty nice, but since hard PT resets, building PT is always a loss, because you still need 120 pulls to guarantee the featured 6-star in the next banner, so unless you can afford 120 pulls every banner, this reward is basically worthless. Otherwise you're basically trading 60 pulls for 10 pulls only, which can only be used on the next banner. That's the true catch of this gacha system. And lastly, just to tell you, the hard PT only works once per banner, which is a huge problem if you're planning on pulling duplicates. In that case, you have no choice but to rely on the 240 pulls hard PT, which is absolutely massive even for fails. And that's about everything for character banner. On the other hand, the weapon banners work completely different than the characters, as they don't cost us real money, but instead the tickets you receive from pulling characters, as you see the income list here. And unlike character banners, you can only do 10 consecutive pulls with 2,000 tickets, which honestly isn't too bad by itself. However, when it comes to drop rates, it's kind of funny because it's both generous and stingy at the same time. On one hand, the 6-star drop rate is a hefty 4%, but on the other hand, the odds of actually getting the featured weapons are only 25%. On top of that, the soft PT only triggers at 40 pulls, whereas the hard PT at a massive 80 pulls, which requires you to do around 200 pulls in character banner. And the worst of it is that unlike character banners, none of the PTs carries over to the next banner, not even soft PT. So yeah, once again, make sure you have at least 80 pulls before going for the weapons, which is quite a lot. That said, none of these cost over values, so it's basically free rewards for pulling characters, so I can't complain at all. Finally, as for whether the game is free to play friendly, my answer is, kind of. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, you are going to spend most of your time running factories, all of which are entirely free to play. Besides, based on my experience so far, I haven't hit any big walls in the story at all, even though I haven't pulled for anything yet. In fact, the early game is actually pretty easy thanks to the decent newbie rewards. You get a free 6-star healer plus a signature by just logging in. And on top of that, the game gives you 40 standard pulls for getting the 6-star unit, plus a standard 6-star weapon of your choice. However, when it comes to the actual rewards, namely the oro barriers for pulling limited characters, it's actually pretty bad. In fact, there's no reward for new players whatsoever. I was expecting at least 10 pulls or something, especially for beta purpose, but nothing. On top of that, maybe I'm missing something, or maybe I just didn't explore enough. I've only managed to gather about 20 pulls while playing in a normal pace, which is nowhere close to the 120 pulls needed for a guaranteed 6-star. Just to let you know, each chest only gives about 10 to 30 oro barriers, yet you need 500 for a single pull. On the other hand, although the daily reward gives you 200 oro barriers, which is slightly better than what other games offer, it doesn't change the fact that overall income is simply too low for the new players. So yeah, remember how PT resets each banner? Personally, I don't see how anyone can reasonably grind their way to 120 pulls within 3 weeks of banner duration. That's why I still haven't pulled anything yet. So for the free-to-play players, you'll most likely miss the first rate of 6-star, and there's basically nothing you can do about it. And that's my honest take on this aspect. Alright, so that's basically everything I experienced in this second closed beta. I've tried to cover as much as possible in this video, so if you made it all the way here, thanks a ton. Now as for my thoughts on this game, honestly I really enjoy my time with it as it feels totally like a finished game rather than a beta. As a matter of fact, the game is incredibly well optimized, and I experienced zero major bugs or stuttering during my entire playthrough, which is just insane. Besides, pretty much everything about this game is really good and solid. The combat is fun, the factory system is interesting, characters are simple to build, and the graphics are looking amazing, and so on. That said, my only real concern is the character gacha, as it feels pretty rough, especially for new players. So if they become more generous and gives us more pulls on the release, this could easily end up being one of the top gacha games out there. Seriously, that's why I can't wait for the game to release, and I will likely make a few beginner guides once it's come out, so stay tuned if you're interested in this game too. Alright, so that's about everything for this video, and just so you know, the beta is still open for a little bit longer, so if there's anything you want me to check out or talk about, feel free to drop it in the comment section, and I'll try my best to cover it in another video. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.